And we're happy to open tonight's program with Alan Middleton, the professor of marketing at the Schulich School of Business at York University. Good to have you back in that chair.
Good to be back, Steve.
We're going to look at some ads because the ads have been interesting, different, provocative, compelling, starting with the Liberal Party. Here's what Premier Dalton McGuinty's had out there. Michael, roll tape, please.
When the global recession threatened Ontario, we acted. We created a new tax plan to attract jobs. The plan's working. New investment is pouring in. Today, Ontario is the leading car maker in North America. This year, we created more jobs than the rest of Canada combined. In June, we created more jobs than the entire United States. Together, we've achieved so much.
What do you think?
Nice work. Came off the back of doing some very we're all together, sort of gritty Ontario people kind of advertising.
Which he wasn't in.
Which he wasn't in. But then they had to get the focus back on him after Hudak came after him with Taxman. Nice. A logical place for them to start off, saying, look, things are okay, calm down any people who are thinking about moving, and make people think, oh, well, you know, it's not too bad where we are.
I thought it was an interesting choice because when they brought that ad out, his numbers were bad.
They were.
And to actually focus him, white screen, nothing else going on in the ad, was a risky decision, didn't you think?
Risky in one sense, but absolutely necessary, because whatever the details of constituency by constituency and some of the bigger issues, ultimately what it will come down to is, do I feel good in the hands of this person relative to the two or three others? And so I think they had to go that route. Was there a risk because of the dislike of him? Yes, but also that's the leverage point. If we can get his personal popularity up, then the Liberal Party numbers go up with it.
Well, you've got a theory about this, right? The 4 phases of the Liberal campaign?
That's right. So phase 1, everything's good and everything's in its place, so stay with us. Oops, let's look at the polls. Didn't quite work. We need to talk a little bit more about the agenda and particularly about jobs and the economy. They're not as bad as you may think. Version 3 going, okay, the nasty PCs and the NDP are after us. We need to hit back and worry the population about what's going on if either of those get in. And then this very strange, what I found very strange, the NDP and the PCs are very similar. Look how much they voted together.
183 times together.
But firstly, congratulations for the Liberal research people on tracking that down. But secondly, a very odd strategy, and I think actually makes sense with what's come later in the campaign, which is Andrea Horwath is making a bit of a dent. Now, part of it's because of the closeness of the polls, and people recognise that she may be a kingmaker, either side, if there's a minority. But also, she's jumping onto the, apologies for doing this, the Jack Layton feeling bandwagon, because it's very interesting, their ads, which we'll talk about in a minute, it's very much focused on her and her energy and a little bit of building charisma around her. And I think the Liberals in their advertising got a little nervous about that, hence the NDP PC version.
Okay, Liberals in first place, we started with them. Conservatives were the opposition, we'll go to them next. Here's the ad that's had tons of play on TV screens over the last month. Michael, roll tape, please.
Dalton McGuinty promised.
We will not raise taxes.
But he's become the tax man. With his health tax, his HST tax grab, his sneaky eco-tax. And adding HST to your hydro bills, the tax man keeps making you pay, with no idea how hard it is on you.
We will not raise taxes.
But he's proven that he will raise taxes. Don't let the tax man get you again. It's time for change in Ontario.
Thoughts?
Well, it explains why McGuinty went on television with the white screen background. What they need to do is what's called an inoculation effect. Don't let the image of your leader be totally associated with the negative message of the PC. So very logical that the Liberals went back and say, hey, jobs in Ontario, things are okay. For the PCs, a very logical approach. Number one, build on the concern about has McGuinty been straightforward with us. Number two, touch a key issue that they know worked in the Metro Toronto region election, but also was part of the overall federal area, which is worry about taking money out of your pocket and taxes. So a very logical approach, good, hard-hitting, one problem. When you're that hard-hitting in attack, Canadians in every province, but particularly Ontario, kind of want to say, okay, show me what you got, as well as the attack. And my view of the PC strategy is they've been a bit too light on the show me what you've got. Political theory and communication theory says, logical, opposition parties should attack rather than build total programs. But there's a balance you've got to get, and they push so much behind that advertisement that the overall association is attack, attack, attack.
But you wonder, you know, that ad, you know, Rob Ford ran those kinds of ads, you know.
He did.
I mean, not on television, they didn't do that kind of thing, but that was his platform, basically. You're being taxed too much, there's too much gravy, I'm here to stop the gravy train.
Right.
Worked like a charm. Now, we're a year later, and, you know, the polls would suggest Tim Hudak's not about to win a majority government tomorrow night. So does that suggest that beating somebody up as, quote unquote, the tax man is not the magic bullet it once was?
Without that balancing act of what they actually do believe in. I mean, we've got to be careful sitting in Toronto, however important Toronto is to Ontario. The Ford effect is Southern Ontario and Metro Toronto particularly. But you're right, we've absolutely had this year, and now we know the communication that said, don't worry, I can handle taxes and find ways to reduce the deficit. Nobody's believing that. So you probably got a bunch of the floating voters, people who have been Liberal in previous elections, maybe swung over in the metro area to Ford, going, I wonder if that's a credible promise.
Family. Dalton McGuinty's got 4 beautiful children.
Yep.
We haven't seen them once on this election campaign.
I know.
Andrea Horvath has a son, teenage son. Haven't seen him either. Tim Hudak's got a beautiful little 4-year-old daughter who's been
Which he talks about.
Who's on the bus, who he brings to all his events. She's out there, little Miller. What's the cumulative effect of all of that?
2 images are already soft, both Dalton and Horvath. 1 image is hard. You have to harden the soften image and toughen up the strong images. So very logical, Dalton's got to talk about what I'm doing. She's got to talk about credibility and the ability of being credibility. Women, as one of your other guests is going to talk about, have that as a loaded interest anyway. So what Hudak has is associated a little bit with the Harris administration, a little bit with some tough policies, certainly with the attack ads. He's got to try to come across as, I'm a warm human being.
Because there is a gender gap. There is a gender gap. I mean,
Absolutely.
the Liberals have more women supporters than the Conservatives.
Absolutely.
So bringing his wife and kid out there is all about softening them up.
Makes sense. And the fact that when he's not with them, he's talking about it. You know, in his only comment on education, difficult platform to attack the Liberals on, has been, I care about the debate that's going on about how sex education is taught in the schools. My child, and so he very much personalises it to soften that image. Very much in parallel, but in a slightly different sense, of what Harper did federally. The sweaters and the warm approach.
Dalton McGuinty never sat in David Peterson's caucus when the Liberals were previously in power. Tim Hudak did sit in Mike Harris's and Ernie Eves's caucus, Ernie Eves's cabinet, in fact, when the Conservatives were last in power. So McGuinty doesn't get touched with any of the previous Liberal baggage / brand. Does Hudak?
A little bit. Voters, quite sensibly, have short-term memory. But there will be a bit of connection, those who follow it. And certainly it's part of the attack on Hudak that he was part of it. So the Liberals have reminded people, and the NDP have reminded people. But mostly what people are going to judge is what they hear from that individual in the party in this election.
I guess similarly, you'd ask the same question about Andrea Horvath. She wasn't there when Bob Rae was in power,
Right.
so the same, if I can put it this way, guilt by association is not there.
Yeah, and also a much longer period away,
True.
so there's a lot of distance, and of course Bob walked over the floor.
True.
So,
She mentioned that at the debate. When
yes,
Dalton
that's
McGuinty
right.
talked about, complaining about Bob Rae, she
That's
said,
right.
isn't he your federal leader
yeah,
now?
that's right.
Anyway, okay, one more party to go. Let's see the NDP ad. Michael, roll tape, please.
People feel like they're falling behind. We can give tax breaks to the companies that invest in creating jobs here in Ontario. We need change to make life affordable by taking the HST off home heating and hydro and reducing it on gasoline. The kind of choice that New Democrats are offering all across Ontario. Now that's change that puts people first.
The smile, the music, what do you think?
10 out of 10 for style. Not sure about some of the content, but the style, the very set that she's in a crowd, she's talking, consciously picking out the full family. The fact that it's up and positive, very important, where the other stuff's going on with one party being defensive and the other on the attack. So very nicely planned emotion around the play. Now, the 2 points she talks about, one, potentially very positive, but then the tax to corporations goes down with the traditional NDP supporters, but I worry about how that goes down with the very voters she needs to bring in from the Liberals and the PCs.
Okay, here's my follow-up on that. People watching that ad, do you think any of them came away? I'm tempted to do a survey of the studio here because my hunch is...
You missed it.
They didn't hear the content.
Absolutely.
They saw the style.
I agree.
You do agree?
I agree.
So then if you didn't like the content, that's not going to hurt her.
The people who watch and are involved in the process will pick that up. For most people, it will be the general feeling. And, at a risk of being contradicted by post-election research, I think this is part of the reason there's been a level of excitement in the campaign. Not only because she's looking quite credible as she goes ahead and do it, plus the polls showing it's a close race, but the energy she's put into it and the credibility she's put in by the very style of the communication have changed the game a little bit.
Well, let me follow up on credibility because, if there is a minority government tomorrow night, she's the kingmaker.
Absolutely.
Have the NDP ads positioned her, with enough gravitas to play that role?
I don't think that's been the focus of their advertising or their plan. Has it had that effect? I think she's on a people's champion role. And the people's champion role is not a bad role to play into a minority government.
Let's just, in our last few minutes here, do some sort of overarching look at what's happened on the hustings. Do you think once the image of the leaders is essentially set in the public's mind, Dalton McGuinness's been around since 1990. Tim Hudak first got elected in 95. Admittedly, Andrea Horwath's been on the scene only for about 5 years. But once that image is set, can you do anything with ads in 30 days to change it?
Very tough. We know all impressions, not just politicians, but everybody. Those first few seconds when you meet somebody form so much decision-making about people. So if you want to change it, you've got to have a little bit of shock value in it. And frankly, none of them have done real shock value. We expected the Hudak to come out more aggressively. We expect Dalton to play it very quietly, which has been his whole method. Horwath is more interesting because people haven't known what to expect for her. So again, this advertising for the NDP we just talked about is really image setting new for a lot of people, and that may be its huge advantage. But otherwise, you're entirely right, Steve. People will modify their view during a campaign. It depends whether there are hot issues that they address. And right now, although there's a myriad of issues that have been talked about, the underlying issue is confidence in the economy. And right now people are going, do I want change to tackle that? Do I want stability? My guess is people will go more for stability.
Well, the polls today would suggest that that's what's at. Have you seen anything during the course of this campaign, be it an ad on television, in the newspapers, some event, and you came away from it thinking, you know what, that was a mistake. They just blew that. They shouldn't have done that.
I think the overemphasis on attack by the PCs has been an error. Not a major error, but certainly an error. I think McGuinness are not reminding people enough about more good things, education policy, for instance. It might have gone, but I don't think they're a major error. I think NDP's run a very good campaign, building off, so I don't think there's any significant errors. The thing I mark about this election is the new single interest advertising that's gone on around it, particularly the kids and the teachers. Very high profile.
Working families have done something
for
the Liberals. Yeah,
and I think that's a trend we're going to see. And what we don't really know is how that impacts the overall decision. People are much more focused on single issues that affect them, but the whole political process at this time is about trade-offs. Overall, how do I feel about across? The more you have single issue parties coming in, quite dominant sometimes because of the restrictions on how much you can spend with the major political party. Be very interesting to watch how that changes people's viewpoints.
Okay, and in our last minute here, you've studied this stuff for 3 decades, I'm guessing, right? Is there anything that you saw during the course of this campaign where you went, haven't seen that before, that was good?
Very interesting. When the Liberals started with what I call the Chevy from Detroit ads, that good feeling, I thought, not bad. Nice production, very nice feeling about the province. And I thought they were about to do one of my hot buttons is how much tourism advertising gets done immediately before the election, or in now Foodland Ontario advertising, because it's about feeling good if you're the incumbent. You know, change is always a risk. So the incumbent has always got to make that happen. But other than that, you know, what was interesting was how low-key the election was for most people and how much it's livened up because of recent changes.
You'll be watching us tomorrow night, right?
I will absolutely be glued to watching it.
TVO, 8 o'clock.
You got it.
Alan, good of you to be here with us tonight. Thanks so much.